Just in case. Okay, we're ready to go. We're
Perfect.
on the move. Wonderful. Okay, so Andrew, thank you so much for coming back. First of all, I have to
Of
say
course.
that the response from our original interview was amazing.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you very much. For those of you who've never met Andrew before, Andrew is a paralegal out of his office is in Hamilton, though he covers wherever you need him to go, provided that he's got the transport and caveat. And he deals with a lot of issues at the LTB, the Landlord Tenant Board. He's an amazing paralegal, full of information and a great sense of humor. So thank you so much for coming back today, Andrew. Our goal here is to sort of see where we were when we interviewed the first rent collection day on April the 1st. And now we're on June the 2nd. So we're past our third one and talk a little bit about what that means. So I got questions. Do you want to say anything before we start?
Well, thank you for bringing me on.
Oh,
So I
absolutely.
certainly enjoyed the last interview that we did a while back, and things have changed quite considerably.
Okay.
So there's a lot to talk about because
oh, awesome. Well,
some hot topics are good.
if I don't cover a question, like everybody who's listening, please, I've got my Facebook going here on the side as well. If you're on Zoom, please put the question in the chat box just so we can get everybody an opportunity. And if you're on the Facebook Live, then by all means, I'm just trying to pull it up here so I can make sure I see everybody. Let's see, come on. Oh, it just goes to the silly thing. If you're on the Facebook Live, then please just put your question in there, okay? I've also, in the chat of the Zoom, you'll see over here, and if you're watching the Facebook Live, I'll put it in the comments a little bit later. This is a link to all of our online resources. So our other interviews, any appointments that you need, websites, etc., that we feel are relevant in this environment. So please feel free to go there. Okay, Andrew, so let's on the road here. So first and foremost, Andrew, I'd like to ask you, is there any chatter about the possibility of the Landlord Tenant Board, the LTB, we'll call it from here on in, the LTB reopening? And if so, when are people anticipating that?
That's one of the $1 million questions. So
I didn't want to lock you down to a date, but I did want to ask you sort of what are people thinking?
Yeah, that's a $1 million question. You know, I've did a lot of research on this, so I won't give you conjecture. I'll just give you the straight facts of it, unfortunately.
Okay.
So Chief Justice, Ontario Chief Justice just announced this morning, so it's really quick, that they are not opening the Superior Courts up until a vaccine is created.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was this morning.
Sorry, I don't listen to the news that often, so I get it.
This is not really something that they would announce so prevalently. Only the law, like it was on the, I think I saw it at the Ontario law Gazette. So it comes from the Bar Association. So, small claims courts, criminal courts, pretty much everything is affected by this. And the number one thing that's going to be affected is the Landlord Tenant Board. For us, for landlords and everyone working inside of real estate, the LTB is probably the most congested tribunal. It is it's the hardest one to sort of run because it has to be, a lot of the stuff has to be done in person through arbitration and that kind of thing. And inside one courtroom, you'll have 200 people, 300, right? Okay. And then let's see, if you take a look at a hotspot like Toronto, there's 12 courtrooms, you have 40 practitioners in there, plus all the clients and all the tenants, and then the unrepresented people, and you look at mediators, court staff, etc., security. So, in one hearing day, and they run hearings, I think it's Toronto, it's Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, you'll have 100 matters on the docket every day in each courtroom with 6 courtrooms running.
So basically not for a long time.
not for a significant period of time. I would say that. Okay. Evictions the same thing. So.
Okay. So are people finding any kind of workarounds to this? I mean.
Yeah. So unfortunately, this is also it's politics involved in this. So we're seeing that. Yeah. So what we're seeing is. Okay, so I'll give you raw facts again because I don't want my head to be bitten off later on by someone that thinks I'm taking a side with anyone. So I'll give you just the straight facts. I took a look this morning about how many current matters that I have personally. I have about 67 active matters in the landlord-tenant board.
Wow.
Out of the 67 matters, surprisingly, only about 20%, 22 to 23%, is N4s, so non-payment of rent. The rest of them
Okay.
are entirely other matters.
Okay.
And from those, none of them are going to go to a hearing. None whatsoever. However, every single one of the tenant applications that I have, I have about 14, 15 of those, all of them have scheduled dates. So if a tenant puts an application in, it's going to get a hearing over the telephone. They'll accommodate and they'll make it work. But if you have a hearing right now, as a landlord, you're not getting it.
Okay, so clarify that for me. I'm not sure what you mean. Tenant application.
So if a tenant alleges wrongdoing by a landlord, so he broke in, there's no water in my unit, et cetera, the landlord and tenant board will put it through something called a case management hearing. And then from there, it'll go to a full hearing, right? So the first case management hearing is designed to help you settle and come to a mutual agreement. And then afterwards, if you can't do that, it goes to a hearing where, an adjudicator actually presides and gives an order. And in practice, I know what the landlord tenant board specifically in Hamilton says it's doing for all applications, but the reality of it, we're just not seeing any hearings coming out for landlords. We're just seeing hearings coming out.
So the hearing for tenants. Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
All right. I appreciate your candor.
Yeah.
Okay. So all that being said, I mean, I know you said only about 20% of the cases the caseload that you have right now are N4s for non-payment. Obviously, it varies, I think, from the thing I'm realizing is it varies very much from geography to geography and the nature of your portfolio as well. Like one person might have 30%, another person might not have any, just because the nature of their portfolio and the tenant they attract. All that being said, I know you do speak with a lot of landlords. What are some creative incentives or programs that have come about over the last 3 months that landlords are using to keep clients on side with their rent?
So surprisingly, there's not that many people not paying their rent as much as people thought there would be, which is good. I know if you're listening to this,
if you're a landlord, though, one person not paying their rent is like this big.
Yeah, I understand. So getting on the good side at this point, having them pay as much as they possibly can is certainly, and going in with good faith when someone is not paying their rent is certainly important. And as of right now, unfortunately, there's not much recourse or any other, no one's going to be moving out.
We talked about this last time. Like,
there's no one's moving. Any rational person is not moving. If they are moving, it's most likely because they want to escape something. So if you do, genuinely wish to have, your relationship is degrading to a point where you can't have this tenant to the property anymore, the number one thing I always tell my landlords I'm dealing with is the first thing you should do is just say, you have a 1-year lease, and if it's not month to month. Leases are notoriously hard to break in Southern Ontario.
Yes.
They're notoriously hard. So what you'll do is offer to break that lease, use last month's rent, and then you all part ways amicably. If, you have a problem with non-payment of rent, you waive the rent, ask them to leave. That is the easiest way of doing it. Cut the costs and just move along.
Right.
If the costs now have ballooned and we're looking at, thousands of dollars.
Cut your losses and get the heck out of Dodge.
Yeah, get out of the asset as fast as you can. If you have to dump the property, if you have to, call yourself, call Claire and, have a honest conversation in regards to actually, selling it or just putting it on. I know there's some programs now with RBC and CIBC in regards to deferring the mortgage on the property. But in reality, and that, even I understand because it just
delays the inevitable.
Right.
It delays the inevitable, and then you're paying interest because we interviewed a mortgage broker. Then you're paying interest on that ability to delay. I get what you're saying, but there's I mean, the thing I've heard the most of, honestly, Andrew, is the landlords who are drawing like the hard line. It's not working.
No.
So the ones who are saying, listen, pay me as much as you can. Let's talk about this. Pay me as much as you can. What is that? What is your situation? So I agree. Now you said, and I'm sorry, I'm going to go off the question.
Go ahead.
For you to determine a little bit.
No.
Because you said who in their right mind would move right now. So if you're a landlord with a vacant unit, are you saying that there's nobody out there?
Of course not. There's always going to be somebody looking for new housing. Right.
Okay, just want to make
It
sure.
is. Yeah, yeah. There's always someone looking for new. Actually, no, the vacancy rate's quite low in Hamilton. So,
Well, Hamilton's a whole other kettle of fish. Yeah,
yeah, that's
it
true.
was
So,
hard. It
but
was hard to find something before this.
yeah. So, I mean, there's always going to be something for you to view. There's always going to be, the market always continues in regards to a pandemic or whatever it may be. But the reality of it is people aren't breaking leases right now. Right, we're at a historical low right now for people breaking leases. So the landlord tenant board registers anywhere between 700 to 800 leases being broken with N11s, which is mutual agreement for breakage of a lease, which is registered, and they would do that every month. And I'm looking at the stats here that were brought out a couple of weeks ago, and we're looking at 100. They're down
Really?
they're down almost
Wow.
400%. So people aren't moving as much right now, right? Which is probably mirrored with sales statistics right now as well. But there are still options. What I would say is, if you can stay on the good side of your tenant in regards to helping them with diapers or helping them with food or helping them whatever it may be, and just being understanding in sort of tough time, that will net you your most amount of well, it's a business.
Goodwill.
It's a business. You're strategic giving, right? You don't want to have to call someone like me and deal with inside profession. It's truthfully, right? I never
You're
want to
more
have
expensive than a box of diapers, Andrew.
Oh yeah. Legal fees are a pain, regardless
They
of
are.
and they're important, but they are a pain, right? So I rather than having someone come and spend, it's people think it's taboo to talk about money, but a standard application costs about, from a half decent paralegal will cost $1,000 to $1,300. That's just one, right? And then if you have two or three, it's 400, 500, whatever it may be. So you can be spending $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 just to deal with a matter that could have been dealt with, hey, we'll give you some forgiveness on this. We'll do this. There's a problem with your property. We'll come by. There's a lot of other incentives. There is one thing I wanted to touch on this specific question when I read it, because I got into a debate with another paralegal last night in regards to what would be the political and the honest thing to say.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people moving into the other side of evicting people, which is, there's two types of law. There's civil law, and then there's criminal felonies and that kind of thing.
Right.
Illegal evictions right now have skyrocketed, and because so there's a lot more happening. So what people have been doing, and I've heard, and I really want to stress how much of not good idea this is. If you have any landlords listening, don't try this. They've been waiting until the tenant leaves the property, and then taking off the door, boarding up the entire property, and removing all the items, putting it out in the front door.
What?
Right? Yeah. So if you do something like that, it's kind of nifty. It's smart when we think about it, because what happens is housing enforcement can't enforce the tenant to go back into the property. You have to go to the landlord tenant board because you've clearly broken the law. However, the police can't do it either because you've taken off the door. When you take off the door, it destroys the unit, or it destroys the habitability of the property, and you've boarded it up. So essentially speaking, there isn't a unit for you to go back into. So legally, their hands are tied. So, and the courts right now are furloughed. So if you do that, essentially speaking, there's no recourse for the tenant to do anything, right? You have the tenant out of the property, and you can now, a couple months re-rent it, or you could just sell the property with vacancy, which right now is a hot sale, and you can make a profit, right? So that is what people are doing, and it's dangerous because there's not going to be any repercussions right now. You have to understand that, and that's for any law. And there's a new bill coming out in the next couple of days called the Community Housing Enforcement Bill, and it's in second reading at Queens Park, and they just upped the illegal eviction fine rate to $37,000. It used to be 25, now it jumped to 37, and they're using a lot more liberally now. And they've tweaked a lot of things in there. So I know people are in a tough time, and I keep having clients ask me about, if they were attempting to do something, what would they do to have their don't even go down that road, because it's just going to be a recipe for disaster later on. So,
Okay. Well, I appreciate you sharing that absolutely immoral strategy.
Don't do it. Yeah.
I think you're right though. Like I know even with vacant possession, when we're buying and selling a property and we ask for vacant possession and you say it's because you're going to personally use the property, that the tenant has up to a year to come back to you.
Yeah.
If you don't actually take possession. So, I realize that the short term, great, the tenant is gone, but let's be honest, if I were to come home and find my home boarded up and my things on the front lawn, I assure you I would be a dog with a bone, and I would not care if it took 10 years.
Yeah.
I would want justice. That's a justice thing. So
eventually when you go in front of someone, they throw the book at you eventually. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer kind of thing, and
no.
and but it's important to talk about, because you're seeing a lot of landlords going to the brink of bankruptcy now. We're seeing, a lot of them, right? And when that happens, and just the climate of what's occurring, people look for options that are not good options, right? Call a paralegal, call a realtor, call yourself, look for other people that can offer you other incentives that can help you get into a better state with your tenant, opposed to doing something on your own. Don't ever do something like that. Call someone like Claire, call someone like me, and make the right decision, right?
Okay. I really appreciate that. And I must admit, and again, I'm going to go off the script that I promised you I'd stick to. One of the things I'm finding is I have 2 children in university, and a lot of us are talking about the fact that, so my children's university and so many that I know have actually come out and formally said,
sorry, he's just getting at my foot.
So many of the universities have come out. Well, my children are at Carleton. I've got 2 there. They've come out and formally said that all learning except for labs for the fall semester will be virtual.
Yes.
100%, absolutely. So I was talking to some landlords who have student housing. I was talking to some parents who have kids who are students and they're paying rent. And like there's a lease, but it's a lease for a room that's not zoned. And this kid has signed the lease and the parents haven't signed the lease. And so if you have student housing, please, I strongly encourage you, get ahead of this.
Yeah.
Even if your lease starts in August for the fall term, get ahead of this. Talk to somebody who can talk to you about your rights.
Yep.
Andrew is my preferred person. And also, if you have not signed leases for your student housing, then sit down and let's have a conversation about where the market is going, because then maybe we can look at other alternatives. Right? Yeah, maybe we can look at, do you have to sell it? Are you going to do a 1-year longer term lease for a family as opposed to, so please don't, I'm starting to see glimmers in and around our post-secondary education facilities, especially those that have on-campus housing issues. So anyway, all right. But don't board up the door, guys. Don't board up the door. It's wrong. Okay. So, well, okay. So I know, Andrew, that you represent both landlords and tenants. I know you as a person of great integrity. You're genuinely trying to come up with the best solution for everybody. And but you always take the position that you've been hired to take care of a certain person's side of the transaction's rights.
Yes. Yeah.
So I know that you are very aware and empathetic to both sides of the coin, though. So what is the biggest difference between the landlord and tenant relationships that you are a part of, that you've noticed pre-COVID and today?
Oh.
Are they more adversarial? Are they friendlier? Are
Extremely. Yeah, a lot more adversarial.
They are, extremely. Because they already were.
I gotta be honest, like, when I knew I was gonna speak with you regarding the question, I knew this would be one of those times where almost every answer I give, unfortunately, is either negative or it's.
Well, listen, okay. Yeah, so it's not negative. Well, this is the reality of our world right now, and the reality of our world right now is we have something that has thrown us totally off kilter.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter whether that is a really wonderful thing, like buying a house or having a kid or getting married, or COVID. The reality is when we are thrown off kilter, we grab hold tight. So people are grabbing hold tight. That's not a negative thing. That's an instinctive survival thing. So people are grabbing hold on tight. Are you finding, though, that that's playing out in the dynamic?
Yeah. So essentially what's happening right now. So again, I'll give you just facts of what I have. So I have, like I said, have several matters. Out of all the matters that I have that aren't directly related to N4s, 100% of the tenants have not paid rent. And, out of that 100% of tenants, 94% of them have the ability to do so.
Oh, okay. Sorry, that hurt.
Yeah. So, and that's just not something I've ever seen before. Additionally, I have now the most amount of drug related and violent crime related evictions that I have ever had in 1 month. I have more evictions than I've ever had in regards to that as well. So everything's being moved indoors, right? And police are not willing to enforce some rules and take people in unless you've done something very bad. They're not enforcing any of that. So the outcome of that, sadly, of these things, you're seeing a lot more movement from action rights and Acorn and tenant centric groups. So I'm not going to go into the political debate of who's better, who's not, because you have the Ontario Law Association, you have the Landlord Association, you have all these other sides as well.
There's a lot of people with their
There's a lot of back and forth. Yeah, right. Yeah. But right now, there's a lot of people. There aren't that many people withholding rent on principle. That's there's some places in Toronto that are doing that when they have extremely high inflated rent, but even then it's very rare. The vast majority of people are just not are paying their rent. However, if there's an application currently on a tenant for any reason, the vast majority of them are not paying rent.
So if there's an application, they're just like, screw you, I'm not going to pay.
Yes, because there's no reason to enforce it.
But we're not seeing tenants, like, at least not in like Hamilton. I mean, because the reality is in Hamilton, the vacancy rate is so low.
Yeah.
That if you don't pay rent and you do get evicted, finding a place is really impossible. Tough.
Yeah, it's very difficult. So
the people who are not paying, it's because they legitimately can't pay.
Yes.
Unless there's already an application against them, in which case they're like, okay, so it's a byproduct.
It's just like you said, it's people, selecting and choosing which problem to deal with. And unfortunately, when there is an actual legitimate application, due to an N12, N13 demolition and things that started pre-COVID that are now stretching into COVID, a lot of tenants just historically don't pay the rent up until they talk to a judge, and the judge says, "Hey, you know what? You need to pay your rent." Or mediator, we need to, you need to pay your rent. There's no excuse for not paying your rent. Right. And I can say that 100 times, you can say that 100 times, but the tenant is always going to want to hear it from a person of authority. That would be fine before, but now we're just not seeing any applications go to those points. So, I've got applications from February that have still not been heard yet, and the landlords have not been paid. So, it's a difficult portion right now, and it's hard for everyone, including the tenants. So, it's just the nature of what a pandemic sort of causes. So
I don't know. I've never been in one before.
Neither have I.
Okay, so in that situation, given what you're saying, and given that we don't have, like we're looking at maybe a little longer than we'd anticipated before the LTB comes back. Mm-hmm. I mean, you want to document when your tenants are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. However, if you're documenting something other than an N4, you're saying that this is very likely going to trigger them not to pay rent.
Yeah. There's no way we have sugarcoating it. I'm at a consistent back and forth ethically and professionally. So my knee-jerk reaction is to tell you, if you have something happening in your property that needs to happen, the wait time right now. So I have the actual stats here. I'm gonna pull up, and I'll explain to you why the wait is so long and why you should take it extremely seriously. I never understood why some landlords don't pay close attention to the landlord and tenant board, because at the end of the day, the RTA is your bread and butter, right? It changes so much of what you do and how you act and what you're able to do with your tenants, and just some people don't particularly take too much look into it. So as of right now, I'm just taking a look at the stats. So there's 24 active adjudicators inside Ontario for landlord tenant board. 24. There's supposed to be 55, right? And there, those 55 are supposed to be taking anywhere between 100 to 60 dockets per day, 4 times a week. Mm-hmm. So you're seeing a massive, loss of time when that was pre-COVID.
That was
Now with COVID,
pre-COVID?
that was pre-COVID.
Oy
Now
vey.
during COVID, and the wait time at that point was 6 months just to get into a hearing, right? And
Mhm.
then now, if you have an application, let's say an N12, N13, N4 for non-payment of rent, I can tell you with pretty much 100% certainty, you're not going to have a hearing up until next year, right? And the longer
Yeah.
you wait, the longer that queue is going to grow, right? There's not going to be
Mhm.
a quick fix to this because it's the wheels of justice, the axis of justice. So
Right.
they're not gonna say, okay, well, those applications, we're throwing them out. They're not doing that. It would
Yeah.
erode the system, and that is. So I always tell everyone, if you have an application, you have to do it immediately. You must put it through.
Right. You better make sure you have a financial buffer in that case.
Yeah, and alternatively, if that happens, if you're looking from the stats right now, it's likely that your tenant's not going to pay rent. And if they
Yeah.
do that, there's nothing I can do to enforce it. There just isn't. So, and then you have legal fees to consider as well. So
Mhm.
you're put in a very difficult position because the landlord and tenant board does have expiration dates on those applications. There is an expiry. So if you have someone, you know, like a colleague of mine had a tenant throw a rock at another tenant's property and damage a car, and there was an altercation
Mhm.
between two people, that has a serious limitation how long it can be brought forward, right? You're looking about a year and a half too, and that's just when the application gets to the hearing.
Mhm.
So you're looking at a serious point where you have to judge if you want to let this go or not, because there just right now may not be a way for you to to enforce it. The only alternative to that is an illegal act. If there's a distinct illegal act, they'll be evicted quite quickly.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah,
Wow. All right.
yeah, yeah.
This is very murky.
It is.
It's not a black and white. It's very murky. I really
Mhm.
encourage everybody who's listening, and after talking to you, now is not the time to save your pennies. Now is the time to get really good advice.
Yeah,
Really good advice.
yeah.
So call Andrew. Anyway, okay. Well, we said we talked about the fact that the percentage of tenants in Hamilton who are not paying rent is relatively low, and that most of those are actually a byproduct of having another action brought against them. But is there any well, you mentioned the landlord tenant board, like
Mhm.
actually looking at the RTA, looking at what's going on. Are there any other resources that you think are very important for landlords and tenants to access now that we're 3 months in and there's slightly more established sources?
Yeah, so the Ontario Justice website is fantastic. The Landlord Tenant Board standard website as well. If you just Google Landlord and Tenant Board, the
Okay.
list of new changes. I would take a look at Bill 184, which is still on the second reading. There's a lot of changes. Changes to the biggest thing that I'm really happy for landlords is if there's a non-payment of rent, it doesn't have to go to small claims anymore. It gets handled by the landlord
Oh,
tenant. Oh
that's
yeah,
a big
big
change.
change, big change,
So
right? So
after they leave and they
you can still
haven't
go for rent.
paid,
You can still absolutely go for
and
rent.
where are you going to?
Landlord and Tenant Board.
Whoa,
Big
okay, that's
change.
significant.
Yeah, big change. So now I would tell my
Wow.
landlords, there's no point. If they leave and they abandon the unit, there's nothing you can do. Unless it's 20,
Right.
30,
We talked
35.
about this
Yeah.
on April the 1st.
Yeah. So there was no recourse. There's nothing I can do for you. Part if you want to pay $3,000 to $4,000 to get it to small claims court, and you have a particular reason. I'm not having one of my clients do something out of pure spite when I know it's going to financially harm them. So most of the time I won't take it.
Yeah.
But now you're looking at you're looking at an adjudicator actually handling these things. It's something that they've been pulling for a very, very, very long time.
That is really significant.
Yeah. So now you can actually make an application within reasonable time and still get the full amount of the rent left over, because you just had this sort of weird purgatory area of you couldn't go to the small claims court, but you had to go to landlord tenant. It was really odd for a large portion of time.
Right.
Now they've closed that hole,
Right.
and you'll be able to do that. So Ontario Justice website is fantastic, and truthfully speaking, talking to a paralegal or talking to a realtor about something like this,
I
that
agree.
is your go-to. A lot of the things, I'm so hesitant to give legal advice on things, just so openly, because every case and every matter is its
So
own
different.
merit
Yeah.
and its own thing. I cannot give you wide explanations of what you should do. You have to contact me or contact someone like yourself.
I'm just going
right?
to say, if it's a tenant dispute, I'm just sending them to you,
Yeah,
Andrew. You
yeah.
know
I
this, so
don't charge anyone for calling me. Right? I always wonder. Most paralegals, most lawyers, so not some, a lot of lawyers don't charge for just a consultation, like for a half an hour to explain the issue and what your
yeah,
options are. For at least listen to the options, because the only time or most of the time that I get called in, it's because someone didn't do that, and then the matter got worse and worse and worse, and then
yes,
it's not $1,400, $1,500, $100 problem. It's a $6,000
yeah,
problem, right?
yeah.
And calling it someone like yourself and saying,
Hmm.
you know what, this is something you can handle yourself, or this is something that Andrew could do, or this is something
Yeah,
it
yeah,
has to go to a lawyer. It's far better. Just make the call. It's like 10 minutes,
yeah.
opposed
I,
to
I'm, I must admit, I'm finding a really big difference just in the conversation between you and I from April 1st to today. Because
yeah,
April 1st, we were very much, this is the path.
yeah,
This is what happens. This is where you go. And this time we're talking like, well, you're kind of walking in swampland now,
yes, yeah,
and depending on your circumstances, I think more than ever, like even as you're talking about Bill 182, and I just want to be clear, everybody, that's in second reading. That is not passed yet.
yes,
Okay. You cannot go to the LTB yet. That has to
mhm,
get passed first.
yeah,
So that being said, I mean, the thing that's flitting through my head is, even if that doesn't get passed, this is going on long enough.
mhm,
Like it used to be, when a tenant didn't pay, they didn't pay a month or 2 months or
yeah,
3 months. But now, if people stop paying in April or May, and they don't pay all the way through until they get to the LTV, or till they get to small claims court, that's a whole year.
mhm,
And that is worth going to small claims court for.
it is.
So the tenants, I think they need to be very, very careful about that, because they
Mhm,
have that perception, even if they're not able to pay, and that's the reason, even if it's a justified reason.
yeah,
If they decide, you know what, I'm better off finding a new place than I am catching up once you have work,
mhm,
just be aware that that can actually still come back, even in small claims court, because it's a bigger nut.
yeah.
Bigger nut. Agreed?
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. And
Okay.
it's additionally, it's inside America. I know you can run from debt, you can jump over a state line, and you can't be pulled back and that kind of thing. Canada doesn't exist. So if you owe specifically something like rent, because it's like it's the principles like dine and dashing, right? You've already taken
Yeah.
a service and then you haven't met your financial obligations for the contract. Because at the end of the day, it's a
Right.
contract.
Mm-hmm.
You can be held either inside contempt of court, but you can most likely be prosecuted under criminal fraud. It's happened before, and
Mm-hmm.
the people typically didn't want to make those criminal charges. The prosecutors didn't want to, because it have to be significant, clear. It's not. We
Mm-hmm.
don't put people in jail because of poverty. We don't do that. It's far too immoral. But what we were seeing is people were not paying rent for a year and a half, 2 years, and then they would bolt. And then when they would be served with a summons, they wouldn't show up. That's an entirely different scenario. Then you're going into a portion where it is criminal, because you have to answer to the court and explain why you didn't make these
Right.
obligations. And if you
Right.
don't do that, if you say it's poverty, then it's poverty and that's it. But if you don't and you run, then we're looking at some serious issues, right? So, and
Yeah.
then you're having lawyers and paralegals ended up, hiring investigators to track someone down and then bring them back, and then unfortunately sometimes you can go to a jail sentence.
Wow.
You're looking at what standard rent in Hamilton's what, like 1,000
Oh,
something.
it's more than that
More than
now.
that? Yeah, so
It's up there.
if it goes above that, it's fraud above 5,000. You're looking at felonies charges. It's not a joke, right? It's
I
like
can't believe we're having this conversation,
it is.
honestly.
It's that's the conversation people are having, and this is not. I'm regurgitating what the other people are saying, and other chief justices are saying, and what
Yeah.
other practitioners are saying, and the reality is, this isn't something that's like an argument over politics of what could
No,
happen.
no.
It is actively
This
happening.
is law.
Yeah, this is what will happen to you if this continues on further and doesn't have a finite
Wow.
end. And sadly, because of the pandemic, it's just pushing people to that point.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I know, I have clients who have tenants in their properties
Mhm.
and they want to sell.
Yeah.
And I've told them, no, it's not. Like, if they don't have to financially sell, I'm telling them, listen, the reality is you can't sell vacant possession. This person is paying way below market rents.
Yeah.
You're going to get hit really hard on the price. And as well as, if it's a larger place, like a 6-unit place, those people have a right to, so long as, they're being above board, they have a right to a safe environment. And again, we talked about this back in April.
Yeah.
However, we are getting, like you said, we're getting to a situation where some landlords, they have to sell.
Yeah.
Irrelevant of whether they have a tenant or not. Irrelevant of whether they have a tenant paying. If they don't have a cash flowing property, maybe they've been helping support it. Who knows?
Yeah.
Right. So are there any successful ways where landlords have, well, actually you mentioned it earlier, where landlords have come to an agreement with a tenant to vacate a property in order to sell?
Yes. So I can think of 4 or 5 already on top of my head. So actually some realtors that you work with. So basically we waived rent,
right?
All the arrears that you currently have waived completely. And then,
Did you break a lease?
Yeah. To break the lease and then please leave within this certain time frame. That has worked the most because again, we're now 4, 5, 6 months in. Once the amount of rent goes to like $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, you have to understand it's serious for both parties now. Because the tenant now is concerned because they know they don't have that amount of money and they're trying to escape that debt. Right. And it's unsecured debt, so it will stay forever, especially with a court order. So that is the largest piece that needs to be moved around so you can come to an agreement. And a sale, the property is most likely where you're going to have to go at this point right now. It's like COVID. If you're having significant issue, it's sort of bizarre. The court doesn't consider a tenant not paying rent or causing damage to the property as something that could affect the sale price. To me, that is an archaic thing. Like
it's really significant.
Yeah, it's extremely significant. But that's just the way they consider it because they view the asset as a physical property. They don't consider it with all the extenuating circumstances. So, they're just not going to view it as the same way that you would if you attempt to go for an eviction, something like that. So your best bet is just putting it up for sale. That's your best bet. And then I would say put the closing anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks after the date of termination with the lease, just to make sure you actually have the tenant outside of the property.
I would almost wait until you actually have them out.
Yeah, that too.
Just because I've tried to show tenanted properties and the tenants are just not letting us in. They're not. Even if they have 36 hours notice, they're just not letting people in. And I'm not going to fight with them at the door. And then the listing agent is left reeling and everything else. And irrelevant whether it's a tenanted property or it's an owner occupied, the experience of going into a place determines how much people are willing to pay for it as much as the bricks and mortar do. And if you have a tenant in there who's making it very difficult, it affects the price. So if you have a way of getting your tenant out and you can carry it until then, I get them out. I would get them out before I listed it. I would make life. I think it would significantly help you in terms of, and then the buyer also doesn't have this preconceived idea that, what if at closing this person does leave or doesn't leave, irrelevant of what's signed.
Yeah. There is, as of right now, I want to make it clear. If someone refuses you entry for showing, nothing you can do.
No, there isn't.
Nope.
Nothing.
Yeah. No one's going to enforce it.
Nope.
Police aren't going to enforce it. Housing enforcement's not going to enforce it. There's nothing to be done.
No.
That's it. Yeah.
And they are like, I've come across a lot of tenants who are like, no, you can't come in. And I'm like standing there, and this is pre-COVID too. They're like, no, you can't come in.
Yeah.
And I had one guy, he was like 6'5", and he was like 250 pounds of muscle. And I'm standing there going, you need to let me in. And he's like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
What am I going to do?
It's like, oh, okay. I've been, same thing with me. I've made those tough calls, and I've gone to the properties as well. Attempted to, to come to an agreement with your tenant. Nope. You're not coming in.
No, you're not coming in.
Sorry.
And now more than ever, like I said, like these are times where people are holding on tight to a feeling of security. And I mean, I get where they're coming from. So, okay. So there are now, I read a news story and I'd rather hear it from you. So there's some
Sure, of
news
course.
stories claiming that tenants are deliberately not paying rent and then extorting large sums of money in order for the landlord to provide vacant possession with a sale.
Yeah.
Like, is there any validity to this? Or because I'm a really firm believer that what we're hearing right now in the news is headlines. Like I hear the real estate market has dropped 70%. Well, yes, the number of transactions have dropped 70%, but the prices are actually going back up right now. So, right, it's
Yeah.
headlines. So
Yeah.
tell us a headline that you're hearing about landlord tenants, which just poppycock. I'm trying to find a polite word.
Again, I'm not going to take a political stance.
No.
But yeah, that's true. It is. That's happening quite a bit.
It's true. Okay.
Yeah. So
I'm surprised.
Yeah. So before pre-COVID, I would get questions for flat payment. Like, what is the brass tax? What is the amount of money for you to leave the property on within a certain time? Initially before, like, this is, I really dislike when people bring out, I think it's an investment. I don't know who keeps using the term. Cash for keys still exists. That ideology that, cash for the key, but people would think someone said 2 months rent would work. First and last back would work. I don't know who keeps saying this. That was back in like 2002. That's long gone. You have citizen action groups now that are advocating for about $10,000 to $11,000, roughly, is what their going rate is. And in reality, when you settle it, I've settled several matters for $6,000 to $8,000. That was on the low end for rent, about $900 to $800. For something that's $1,200, $1,300, you're looking at $15,000, $20,000. And I've had my clients strong armed by paralegals, lawyers, other tenants, and I've got numbers from 22,000, 26,000, 35,000, depending on what the sale price is, because the ideology is that the person purchasing it is going to make a significant return on the on the property, so they want a slice of that. That's the nature of what they're looking at. So whatever the deal is, the potential increase of your profit at the long term, at the end, they're looking to take as much or a portion of that amount. So there is some validity in it. It's been going on for quite
it's always been around.
It's always been there. It's not because of COVID there, though. Yeah, it's always been there for a significant
Just the tenant
period.
has a lot more leverage now than they had before.
Now historically now it's a lot more to the favor of the tenant. But this is not a headline that was misleading. If they brought in stats, I would dispute that, because it doesn't happen too often, but it happens often enough for me to mention that it does happen. So I would say probably in a month I would get maybe one or two. I deal with a lot of matters, right? So maybe once or twice a month I would get it, right? So the likelihood that someone like yourself or just a regular investor gets something like this, it's very low, very, very low.
No, but in big places like apartment buildings and things like that, it's more.
That's a guarantee.
Prevalent.
Yeah. If you're dealing with like more than 3 or 4 units, that's a guarantee you're going to get a number.
Oh yeah.
I can guarantee that you're going to get something like that.
Well, and also I think, I mean, I know you do business outside of Hamilton, but again, like, I can't reiterate how low the vacancy rate in Hamilton is. And I think that has something to do with it as well. I mean, if you're in somewhere where there's loads of apartment buildings and the vacancy rate is low, the tenant doesn't have as much of a firm grasp. The landlord has quite a bit more leverage that way. It's not as usual. So, take those numbers into account of where you are. So ask your local realtor. Okay. What should any landlord know now that we have passed the third rent collection date that they did not need to know 3 months ago? I think we've covered a lot. I think their heads are going to explode soon.
Yeah, it's quite a bit.
Anything else?
Call your realtor, call your paralegal, call your lawyer, call your references of information. Don't do it on your own. Whatever it may be, whatever you think it may be, as big, small of a problem as you can consider, call someone with expertise. Don't do it on your own. You cannot afford to do it on your own.
I really wish the recording of our first call had worked, and I apologize that didn't, because so many people are like, can I get notes? Because that was so not your message 3 months ago. Yeah. It really wasn't.
It wasn't.
You were kind of like, listen, I get it. Here's the thing. If you're stuck, this is not a time. If you're unfamiliar, this is not a time to skimp. But the reality is now, you almost need to get ahead of it.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's not a matter of I'll find a paralegal if I feel I need one.
Mhm.
It's I need a paralegal because I'm an investor and we
Yeah.
are in a pandemic and I need to know.
Yeah.
I need to know.
Mhm.
So, and I just for everybody who's going to listen to this, I want to make sure they know like this was not your message 3 months ago.
No, no. And significantly so, I have access. So there's a lot of Facebook groups for, you know, paralegals, lawyers.
Everything.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And regular people don't get access to those things. Right. So, you know, you see where the market starts to shift. Right. So, and it's quite interesting because now you have a lot of lawyers and a lot of paralegals that weren't in landlord tenant law starting to shift because the market is now moving towards that. When this is over, or when the courts start, you know, churning into more orders, when it starts to move more efficiently, it's faster and faster, you're going to see the largest spike of legal fees that you have ever seen in regards to landlord tenant law. Done. That's just
dinner's on you.
Yeah, right. It's like, so if you want, I'm not sounding like an infomercial. I'll never tell anyone that
I know
you must pick that person. But if you don't have a relationship with a paralegal,
get one.
You're gonna have a problem really quickly because those fees are going to increase sharply, right?
Yep.
I know people, they deal with they have property managers that go for them to landlord and tenant board.
Right.
Don't do that because that I can say with guarantee
we
now.
talked about that.
Yeah. There's
in April,
that law 182 has a ban on that now. So they're going to be restricting them out.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Wow. Okay, everybody go and read the Bill 182.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and not only that, but there's precedent. It's been out for a while now, but there's precedent case law against property managers representing in landlord and tenant board, and it's sort of a kind of a political thing. Depending on which adjudicator you get in Hamilton, they could waive that person out or keep them in. But if you have a paralegal on the other side now, you're a property manager, you're done. You're not going to be speaking. You're gone.
There we go.
So that's it. I've done it multiple times. It's just the nature of it. If I have to win for my client, I will. And that's the nature of the beast. So
listen, and you know what? When I've had a lot of success selling tenanted properties, and in large part because I understand that the dynamic between the landlord and the tenant is adversarial. And I'll say to the landlord, listen, when I go in to see these units, I don't want you there. And I'll say to the tenant, I'll say, listen, I'm going to follow the rules to the letter. You need to also.
Yeah.
Can we agree that we're going to both respect each other and follow the rules? And for that reason, like I do follow the rules. I post notice, the required notice. I give them, I do everything I'm supposed to do. And that way, when the tenant says you can't have access, I can say, but I followed the rules, and now you need to as well. And it's not an empty threat.
Yes,
it's legitimate because I've dotted every I. And by the same thing with the landlord tenant, and we talked about this on the last call. I so wish I'd recorded it. If you don't fill out your paperwork properly, you're going to get thrown out.
Yeah.
If for no other reason, then the board is going to be happy not to spend the time because they're going to be so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So make sure your paperwork is done right. Make sure you have representation that's there, that is allowed to be there. Make sure you're properly prepared. So yeah, I agree. Well, and I think it's no different than a doctor or a dentist. In some places it's very hard to get a family doctor because they're all their business is full, their practice is full. And as you said, like there's not a lot of adjudicators, there's not a lot of paralegals out there. You guys, your business, your practices are going to be full. So if you don't have a relationship already, guys, I strongly urge, if you're close to Halton, Hamilton, St. Catharines, Brantford, Toronto, give Andrew a call, talk to him about what you have to do to make him available to you 6, 8, 9 months down the road.
Yeah, okay, that's a serious conversation you need to have with people.
I think so too.
Yeah, the hearing dates because before I would have 4 things on my matter docket. I could walk into court, I have 6 things or 5 things, I would bang them out all together. Bang, 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 bang. Have all my clients there would be fantastic. But now it's a telephone hearing. I can't be in 2 places at once on 2 different calls. If I have one at 1:30, I have one at 1:30. That is it. I have a hearing at 1:30. I can't move someone else in. And they slot hearings like that.
But also, you
So
just the number of things, the number of cases that you're handling. At some point, you're going to be at capacity.
yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm pretty
So
much at this point. I'm at about 88%, and that I'm
there you go, guys.
we're at June 2nd. I'll be at capacity probably by the end of the week, and that's it for this month. I cannot intake anymore because
Right.
I have to close the other files that I have.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just the nature of
Okay.
yeah, the nature of it. Yeah.
Let's see. There we go. Okay, so I touched on the student housing issue, and all my friends who have kids at university are going to want me to ask. So they have this lease in place that their kid has signed. They're supposed to be paying starting in August, and now their kid's doing virtual learning, and the place is going to sit empty. Is there anything that these tenants can do to get out of these leases?
No.
There.
Sorry. Yeah,
We're done.
pretty much. It's a contract.
It's a contract.
Yeah, leases leases are self-contained promises. They're self-contained contracts, and they are notoriously hard to get out of. They're not like other things like purchasing a home, buying cable, that type of thing. It's not like a traditional bill, right? It's its own unique type of thing. And this is pretty much the sense of the word. You're creating a very basic company to company contract. That's what you're doing essentially. So if you have a lease, and I understand the nature of it. I'm not trying to be unsympathetic, right?
Oh,
I
no.
was a student not too long ago, so I know there's quite a few people that are locked into leases, and they're just not going to be going to school. It's all going to be virtual, and they don't see the need for that.
Right.
That's a difficult thing to deal with. The landlord. So I do have a couple of colleagues of mine who are dealing with these types of things. I've dealt with one matter so far that hasn't, hopefully, likely has caused everyone to split up in their own separate ways, which is fantastic. But essentially, if the landlord wishes to enforce the lease, he can, and he can hit your credit, and that is a significant worry, because if this is a McMaster student or university student, or just any student, those that time in their life when they're in their 20s.
Right.
And that's when you build your credit.
It is.
And seeing it shoot down by 200 points, it's because they're not going to enforce it for the first month of non-payment of rent. They're going to enforce it for all of it, all at once.
Right.
And then, and the reality of it is those companies, if you have a cosigner, the soft point or debt collectors isn't actually the cosigner. Like, because mom has a car and that kind of thing, they're not going to do that. You're just going to have one day where your daughter's car is just gone. That's what's going to happen one day.
My daughter doesn't have a car, but okay.
Oh, well, I mean, it's that kind of thing. But, for someone who does that, has a daughter or that kind of thing, like, that's what they do, right? And it's sort of speaking, that's how some of these collectors will handle it. So if you do, and the advice I can give you is, if you are locked in a lease right now,
right,
speak with the landlord at the end of the day, speak with the landlord and come to a financial agreement where you both can separate, and that's it. So if that's paying, you have to pay something. You have to pay something. It's not going to be, because you are asking to break a lease, right? Yep. The onus is not on them to do it for you. You are asking to break it, right? So you want to definitely give up the last month's rent, and I would say probably offer an additional rent as well.
Well, that just marketing to get new tenants, right? Like, even if, like, I'm thinking if you have student housing and your students say, you know what, we're not going to school, so is there something that we can do? And you make arrangements with arrangements with these tenants to say, okay, listen, if you want to break the lease, that's fine, but you're going to cover it until I get new tenants. And you're going to default on last month's rents because it's going to cost me money to advertise it again when I shouldn't need to.
Yes. And you're also looking at the fact that many of these places, they're designed to take groups of people. And they're students, right? So you have a group of 6 girls moving into one place, a group of 5 guys moving into a place. And if one person is leaving, the likelihood a lot of them are leaving. So this landlord has lost all of the income coming to that place in one shot. And now it's very difficult to market something that does not have self-contained units in a student-run area, So you're gonna have adults living together. Like, what is that gonna look like? It's not gonna be easy for them to market these places. So
No, it's not.
you're gonna have to take that in consideration when you're attempting to break a lease, right?
Yeah.
So student
Okay.
rentals are its own thing, and you're also seeing universities now getting involved in these types of matters.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
if you can call in if you have a, I know Carleton is doing it, Ryerson's doing it, some of the places are. I don't know if Mac is doing it just yet, but they have a lawyer
Mm-hmm.
on, like a standard, just a lawyer working at the college at all times. Most universities do, and the students associations are right now speaking with landlords in regards to that, and they're making incentives. They're offering to put them on their vendor lists. They're offering for them to say, hey, you know what, forgive these kids from coming in, we'll put you on our list for housing. You'll never have to worry for another student going into your place, because as soon as someone exchange student needs a place, it'll go straight to you. So there's a lot of things that these guys are doing for pro 10 years down the line.
Right.
That may be worth your time, right? Take the loss now on that
Who
property,
knows?
preferably.
Who knows? Okay, folks, we have gone well over time. Andrew, it is always a pleasure. Thank you so much. You're
Of
always
course.
so informed. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't touched on? I think we covered a lot.
I think, yeah, my voice is slowly disappearing. I don't know if you can hear it. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And again, if I can reiterate something, always just contact someone of knowledge if you need help. Contact Claire, contact myself, just speak with someone before you make a decision.
Yeah. And I know we had said before, like I said, we had said before on April 1st, if you're not sure about it, then please call. And now is, just know that the situation is complex. It varies from situation to situation. So don't create a problem. Don't create $1,000 problem to try and save $5.
Yes,
that's all I'm saying.
true.
Those aren't the numbers, but you know what I mean. Anyway, yes. Andrew, thank you so much. This has been on Facebook Live, and we'll be keeping the recording up there as well. I'll tag you in this. But Don says, that was amazing. Thank you both. Oh, you're welcome, Don. Our pleasure. And for all you landlords and tenants out there, please remember that we all need to get through this together, and good, honest conversations, even though you're on opposite sides, will go a long way to helping us all come out of this maybe a little bit better, a little bit stronger. So thank you so much, Andrew. Have a great day, guys. Okay, bye-bye.